as local residents. And so, so Jim and Monica, they kind of actively participate in the policy lab, which I run, and they nominated their project to be one of the demonstrator projects. Each of the demonstrator projects is inherently has their own challenges or their set of challenges. And so if I hand over to in fact, if I ask Filippo and Jake just to briefly introduce yourselves in terms of who you are and your backgrounds, and then Monica and Jim, if you can explain what your project's about and what your emerging challenges are. So should we begin with Filippo?
Okay. Hello, guys. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, everybody. I am Filippo, co-founder and managing partner of Plus Value. And by the way, partner of Lend-Lease in Italy, but this is something we'll explain later. So somehow Jake and I are connected through our partnerships. Plus Value is an advisory company specialized on innovation and strategy, innovation and sustainability strategies for corporations, and working also with large public sector organizations, in particular the European Commission. The connection with Lend-Lease and urban regeneration is because we applied our formula to urban regeneration first, and the most important project we have been working on for a while is mine, Milan Innovation District, a very large urban regeneration and innovation district at the same time in Milan.
Perfect. Thank you, Filippo. Should we go over to Jake?
Yeah. So hi everyone. So I'm Jake Cotton. I'm Place and Growth Manager at Lend-Lease Europe, but also work within our urbanization practice, which is kind of sharing best practice globally. I sit in a sort of strange role that hasn't existed before, but looking at all sorts of kind of urban strategies, sustainability strategies, health strategies across all of our developments. Looking at urban health and the connection between climate change, urban health, and then the kind of urban realm, and how that sort of manifests in a a large master plan urban regeneration scheme. Also setting up the innovation district here in East London and Stratford across the 2012 Olympic Park, which encompasses 4 different local London boroughs, but all around the mission of better urban futures, focusing on climate adaptation, health, and mobility, which is how I've met Darren and also Filippo as well. So I'm sort of the secret agent on the inside of a very large corporate developer, trying to basically get great outcomes across all of our really big city-defining projects.
Wow. So thank you, Jake. You're our corporate good guy.
Yeah.
Our corporate friend.
Then yeah.
Outside.
And so Monica and Jim, over to you guys, please.
So, well, I will just sort of frame how we proposed our demonstrator project to the London Policy Group, and that was around, we're located in Michigan Central Innovation District in Detroit, and Ford Motor Company is leading that, and it's they've put $1 billion into redeveloping the formerly abandoned Michigan Central train station, and to create it into a hub where innovation and talent attraction and placemaking and all of those elements you're quite familiar with could be created in a dense environment. And then we do more community engaged development around education, and I'll just let Jim kind of explain like how things are changing right now.
Well, certainly from the broad point of Ford Motor Company and their efforts to develop autonomous vehicles and work in the EV charged world. The interesting part about that element of it is talent. And the talent attraction is directly resulting, according to your ability to create imaginative opportunities. And the Michigan Central train station is that kind of vehicle. And then adjacent to the Michigan Central train station, they have another building that they're developing, which is more going to function like we do as an open studio. And in that, you know, the autonomous aspect of it has just recently met with some discourse in terms of its capacity to actually achieve its goal. And where we were thinking it might unfold in the immediate future along with electric vehicles, it's now been put off a decade. And you can imagine what that does to a corporation who is planning on using that as a vehicle to attract talent. And all of a sudden, the autonomous distraction is something that's been put on the back burner. So our interest has always been in the generic aspect of city development, more from the standpoint of community development and grow your own processes in terms of talent. And I think this is the wonderful crossroads that currently is evolving and starting to express itself. And I really love the fact that Jake's doing the stuff on climate change, and what we find in education is that 75% of our kids are now challenged, if not frightened, of their own future due to what we're learning about climate change. And I served as director with McMath Hallworth Solar Observatory some 15 years ago. I did that for about 15 years and worked with kids. And I can remember telling stories about we're 4 billion years in, don't worry, we got 4 billion years to go, but never thinking that it would be in a lifetime that you would be challenged with the kind of discoveries that we're making about our planet and the impact we've had on it. So we have developed a curriculum, if you will, that I think addresses some of those fears from a health and wellness point of view. So crucial, I think. If kids are walking around frightened about their future, that's a unique situation, given the world that's threatening in so many other aspects. It's almost crucial that we have some kind of developments within the context of health and wellness, and something that gives them some comfort about our abilities to address these issues, even as young minds beginning to formulate, constructs. If they don't have the information from which to draw conclusions that are healthy and framing a future that they can identify, then something's wrong with the situation. So we're working very diligently, and I was just explaining earlier with Darren about our greenway situation, which is a very healthy environment. We have a greenway that is opening up. It's 27 miles around the city of Detroit. And that's a project that's already built about 50 million into it, and it's probably going to be another 50 million over the next 5 years, 10 years to finish the 27 miles of concrete as a greenway. What we've been describing to some of the city leadership is ways in which to engage youth in the development of the greenway. We often hear about talking about students as the future, and yet we don't include them in the future. And usually we try and develop it for them and miss the mark. At least personally, in my experience, we miss the mark. And so that's a little bit about what we think is very important in terms of a large city, which has heretofore been very, how should I say, exemplar in some cases in terms of being the home of the automotive industry, and yet has lived its course and now finds competition worldwide and globally that forces one to rethink the whole equation. We can't be a one trick pony here in the state of Michigan and be all based on automotive. And I think young minds, currently we're an opt-out state. 60% of our people, of our best and brightest, leave the state. Something's wrong with that picture. you can't do that for too long before you don't have a state. So we're thinking that Detroit could be that kind of generator of enthusiasm and excitement that is, something that youth are able to construct and work within the context that serves them and serves their moment in this moment and serves, I think, grow your own better than how do we attract talent, grow your own talent.
Thank you, Jim. So you've kind of presented kind of a post-industrial context and a brain drain context. Can you talk a bit more about your actual demonstrator project now, and what are the components? What does it look like, feel like for Jake and Filippo, to get a sense of what you're aiming to do, and what are the challenges, and what do you need kind of answers or guidance on?
Can I speak to that?
Well, we're an incubator. We're a socially focused incubator, and we sort of just try to get an understanding of context and how things are changing, and develop projects and programming in alignment with that. And we spent 7 years developing an innovation district and placemaking concept in Pontiac, Michigan, which is 30 miles north of us. And so for more of a regional connectivity and regional transportation is a big project here. So we're dealing with challenges that the environment produces, and also dealing with, what kind of pops up and what's emergent. And recently, our recent work, we put together a collaboration around, Jim was speaking about the Joe Louis Greenway. We put together a collaboration with the Brightmoor Makerspace, which is located in Brightmoor and not traditionally connected to the downtown area, but they're doing just amazing work and building these outdoor classrooms. And so we negotiated, and we're getting ready for a presentation to have the kids build out those outdoor classrooms along this 27-mile greenway, which is intended to connect the neighborhoods, which is something that just hasn't been done, in Detroit before. It's always been focused on regenerating the downtown, but not the neighborhoods. So connecting the neighborhoods to the downtown. And then as Jim was speaking about with, youth, they also don't really have access to a dynamic 21st century skills development curriculum. And so what does an out of the school classroom curriculum look like? And we partnered with the Better Cities Film Festival, which has its annual flagship festival in Detroit. It moved from Los Angeles to Detroit recently for the last 3 years. And then, COVID hit and it got stalled, but it's kind of building itself back up to become this, locally connected film festival. And so we're weaving together, the Brightmoor Makerspace, and then kind of viewing all of these filmmakers and the submissions that they make as potential curriculum pieces for youth. And we think that's pretty
learn by doing.
Yeah, learn by doing, and that kids can make their own. And we negotiated with Better Cities Film Festival to have they do, like, every day is a thematic film block. And the one that we hosted, we had a panel discussion. It was called the All Powerful Bike Lobby. And so we, any kind of bicycle advocates, developers throughout the city, we had on the panel discussion. And
free bikes for kids.
Yeah, free bikes for kids is getting thousands of bikes to kids in the neighborhood. Brightmoor Makerspace came in via Zoom on the big screen, and we used our mural platform to facilitate that. And then we had a local person who's doing an herbal walk and talk on the riverfront, and just weaving that together and developing that as curriculum. We're doing it in an organic way. I don't know. We'd love any.
It's a bottom
kind of
up. It's what we love about London Policy Lab and the bottom up approach to circular problems. And in that, this is a test bed, much like Milan or much like London, in terms of the large projects that you're doing. This is a large city, and it's a large project that's taking place here.
Should I show our screen?
Yeah.
And then this is more of what we do. I'm going to share my screen, and maybe we'll have some thoughts about collaboration around.
Could I just ask one question around
Sure.
who? I'm guessing, I'm just Googling this a bit more as you're talking. So Ford is the developer, landowner and developer of the precinct. Are you as an organization hired by Ford, or are you hired by a third party that was hired by Ford? I guess I'm trying to kind of plot the ecosystem of relationships there, just in terms of and kind of responsibilities, because it looks like there's a massive 30-acre sort of development across from the station to the public schools, book depository, the factory. So is Ford kind of running obviously
So let me.
Yeah.
Sorry, before you answer, let me elaborate, because I was, although JK is not a European, the European starts with the skeptical questions. Now, I had something around this theme. So I'd like also to understand if we are talking about philanthropic funding, or that what kind of investments is made, or the nature of money. And to be very brutal, whoever is investing, what does that investor expect coming out of this initiative? Because in our experience, is money on money, or money to fix problems. Rarely there is a very genuine investment in the community for its own sake. And for long-term engagement and success of such initiatives, understanding the interests at stake, especially the interest of whoever is putting the money in, is always crucial.
Okay.
I'm the skeptical European,
To both of those questions. So Bill Ford had an idea in that he recognized by driving by the Michigan Central Station, which had become a rune porn star in the civic or the social sector, if you will. And it came to him that perhaps Ford Motor Company would make an investment in the Michigan Central Station as a sales proposition and restoration project. But then he had what I considered to be an incredible great thought, and that was that they don't know the answer to the future. This was Bill Ford's statement, and I find him an iconoclast because he is a carbon producer, but he's an environmentalist. And one goes, And so Bill thinks that he would discover the next great thing by offering the Michigan Central Station and the book depository building as an open lab for talent and imagination and creativity to arrive. And that he would bump into the next great thing. And I think this is quite a risky proposition, but this is how all innovation evolves. And he will bump into it on the bottom floor of the Michigan Central train station. I think that's just an incredible, for a CEO to say, we don't know the answer to the future, is quite an issue. And then again, to invest $1 billion, make $1 billion investment and still not know the answer, but have the courage to think that it might show up, I think is pretty interesting. And in the city of Detroit, very interesting. And if we go back to the history of Ford, and it started with his great-great-grandfather and how he came to Detroit, and he invested in creating the automobile and more importantly, the line for assembly, the assembly line. And his first company folded, and his second company was successful, and he moved it to Dearborn. And here he is 100 years later, going to reinvest in the city of Detroit, which is the automotive capital of the world, and he's going to develop the opportunity from something that is brought together by enthusiasm, imagination, and creativity. That's got success written all over it if one imagines that talent is drawn to that kind of challenge.
Do you have a follow-up question, Jake, before we move on to the money question?
I guess just the second part of my question was, so obviously Ford is making a development or making an investment around the regeneration of this sort of campus, making a campus. But then in relationship to your organization or your role within this regeneration, is Ford has hired you directly as kind of expertise?
National Street.
Ford has not. I have worked with Ford in the past at the executive vice president level of both engineering and design. In fact, so many decades ago, I hate to even make reference to it, but we did Studio of the Future kind of things with the automotive design community across all of automotive back in the 90s. And what I'm pointing that out for is, things become cyclical rather. And in that moment, we're currently looking at how are we going to reinvent the automotive industry. All of Michigan Avenue, all the way from Detroit to Dearborn, is going to be the test bed for how we use technology to reinvent the pedestrian interface and automotive interface in a 21st century outcome. And so they're going to use 20 miles, and they've gotten $50 million of investment from the United States more recently to do 2 miles, which will run right off of in front of from Detroit 2 miles out to past Second Avenue and so forth. And already that's been impacted because autonomous vehicles now are not going to be the circular focus. And there's an organization called CAVNU, which has made quite an investment in this as well, based on the possibilities that represents for new ways of creating mass transit, and not just automotive, but mass transit in terms of if it were maybe subways or were maybe bike lanes or were whatever that mixture that one would find oneself in when we look at the various ways in which cities have to, deal with things like working from home and learning from home or looking and so forth and so on. This is a really rich mixture of things that are evolving that one has to take a decent look at and recognize some of the things we can maybe understand and some of the things we're yet to discover. So I think that the commonality of that purpose is generating a lot of enthusiasm and excitement based on, technology and automotive. But there's a whole world beyond that I'm as interested, if not more interested in. And I have a history in the automotive industry, but I'm more interested in the community side of this equation. I'm more interested in learning from anywhere in this equation. I'm more interested in youth that are going to have to deal with the world we're describing or discovering, and that they have a role in its discovery.
Agreed. So I'm just trying to understand a bit further, just in terms of so both of you work for PHINCO, correct?
Right.
Correct. So then I guess I'm just trying to understand the relationship between Ford's $1 billion investment into a campus, and then I guess where your work sits within that. Is there a connection, or are you guys kind of separate at the moment?
There is a connection. not to interrupt, but there is a connection, as I said, a historic connection, but more interestingly, the effort on behalf of Ford has stalled a bit because of some things that have taken place, the COVID thing, and then we have the situation that is developing with autonomous being tabled, and there's a bit of a stall. Otherwise, we'd be over at the book depository building, because that's an open lab, and it was supposed to open in the fall of this year. Then it was supposed to open in December of this year, and now it's the spring of 2023. So what does that tell you? It tells you that something is causing them some concern. I would also suggest that you're perhaps looking at a recession, and I'm sure that's causing them some concern. Just as an example of we're talking about money, they had to write down $2.7 billion and get rid of a good deal of stuff that was rolling around on the streets around our studio here as driverless vehicles.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jim, and just to clarify, really, from my understanding as well, so going back to the 1 billion Ford investment, so just to clarify, have you been commissioned by Ford, or subcontracted by a third party, or are you working outside of that 1 billion independently of Ford?
We're working outside. We want to create value so that it can be brought inside, and if that turns into some kind of arrangement with Ford, that would be great, but that's not our intention. Our intention is to create value on behalf of the community, and more importantly, on behalf of the education factor.
And then my follow-up question before you kind of address Filippo's questions. So what is your leverage into that decision-making process in which that 1 billion is being spent and governed? So how can you ensure that the voices of the community is actually heard where it needs to be?
That's absolutely a great question. And I would say the naturally occurring opportunities that are available, we've been doing community work in both in Detroit and Pontiac for 20 years. So we know where the real story is and who the real leadership is. Leadership's a funny thing in underserved communities. They don't go around talking about it. And so in 5 years, you might be able to discover who the leadership is. They don't wear any labels. 10 years more like it. 15 years before you're going to have a relationship. And I love people who come in, on a Friday and go, what we're going to do. No, you're not. You wouldn't even know where to start or who to talk to. So we feel real comfortable about that element of it. And what I think is the driving force here, besides, the investment and the dollars and the buildings and all of that. And there have been billions put into the riverfront. There have been billions put into downtown Detroit in hotels and in commercial buildings and Little Caesars and just arenas and Ford Field and the Lions and I mean a lot of money, and yet the outcome of that, zero.
Okay.
Zero. I mean, your brain does a flip flop when you talk about money. What should have done? I mean, just Dan Gilbert alone and Rock Financial and what they've invested to rebuild, and this is over a decade. We're approaching 15 years from the point at which they said we're going to save Detroit. And I want to tell you, when work from home came, and General Motors is in the biggest building in downtown Detroit. General Motors is in the
Renaissance Center.
in the Renaissance Center. They sent everybody home for work from home.
Mm-hmm.
And here we had done campus marches, and it was generating, and it was exciting, and there was a lot of people. The day that they sent them home, it was a ghost town again.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about momentum and money, and it's going to be the solution. It's a little deeper than that, little deeper, a little richer than that. If we're not advocating in on behalf of our community, then we don't understand. Events are really great, except to measure a city by what happens when there's no events.
Yeah.
It's really that. So I mean, if you know, if you're bumping on the sidewalk and excuse me and I'm sorry and you know and so forth and so on, you got a thriving city. If you got to have an event to be a thriving city, you're not a thriving city because the next day there's nobody there.
No,
So when General Motors sent their people home, they said, you know, that's like 7,000 people. It was immediate the next morning. You know, here you had all these would-be entrepreneurs and restaurants and so forth and so on, and they're empty. Even in the building, in the Rensen is huge. I mean, that's 3 towers of pretty extensive office space. And so there's hundreds of restaurants in the Rensen.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
So who's running the kind of innovation district initiative? I suppose I'm just reading an article here from the Detroit Press around Google was a preferred, well, Google was brought in as a preferred cloud computing services, and there's their founding member. There's 126 million in programs, and then maybe I guess how is your organization funded? And maybe that's going into Filippo's question.
Yeah, we're personally funded from a day-to-day point of view.
Self-funded.
So self-funding, but
Well, one initiative.
one other thing to Jake's question, and it's so important, okay, is the central focus of innovation districts is community. It is not a, you know, we're going to create a capacity, but rather we're going to create an opportunity. And there's a difference between one of being in a position to be creative or be a creator, and one of investment for infrastructure, or investment for talent, or investment for the kind of efforting that's necessary to bring something new into being. But it's the bringing the new into being that has value. And that's a really hard proposition. First of all, there has to be something that's worth bringing into being. Secondly, it has to meet at a time and place that is open and capable of facilitating bringing into being. I mean, we recognize failures all the time of many dollars, and I'll just point out more recently Twitter, okay, of okay, it's all about the money. Well, turns out it's not all about the money.
And Jim, if I may just jump over to Filippo for a moment. Again, Filippo, I don't know if you want to reframe your money question, but in terms of bringing a space into being, that really makes me think of Mind in Milan, where you guys were basically, you inherited a desolate kind of industrial wasteland, really, wasn't it? Do you have any kind of reflections? What bridge?
Yeah, I would comment on how you anchor the social environmental dimension into a large urban regeneration project like Mind. By the way, it's not a post-industrial, it's more, it was the site of Expo 2015, so it was just, it looked more like the scene of a Western film after everybody has been killed.
That's how Pontiac. That's how Pontiac is, where we were for 7 years.
So there was really nothing.
Spaghetti Western in this case.
Yeah. Said so, he had a legacy, a very important legacy, because of the relevance of the event for Italy in front of the rest of the world. And so there are some anchor points I would define, at least I would highlight. Number one, it's in the contract between the public authority owning the land and the private developer, which won public tender and got the concession contract to develop half of the 1 million square meters. So in the contract between the two entities, you have the commitment. It's a generic commitment, but it's a commitment to generate impact value. No many details, but you have a formal commitment against which both parties has to somehow come back with some results, including how they measure those. That's a first anchor. The second one, historically, on the site, because of the Expo event, there was a civil society center, perhaps comparable to yours, which has been in the site since even before the exhibition, and it was the coordinating body of all the volunteering activities, from engaging the children to all kinds of social groups and issues, protection of the environment, animals, engagement of the neighborhoods, you name it. So the physical presence of a civil society hub, which is per se a formally registered organization, membership body gathering many other civil society organizations, is a reference point. I would say it has not always been very effective, but sometimes just being the voice of the collective is enough to create the right space. And over the time, investing in such organization, you develop the local capacity to be proactive and settle issues. For instance, they launched years ago a educational program about urban regeneration, innovation districts, and something I would summarize how to picture the city of the future from the point of view of children. It started very small, and now it's an extremely popular program. Naturally, these kind of organizations need investments in order to build capacity. Then I would mention two more things. Number one, three probably. Lend-Lease, Jake can present this much better than me, but Lend-Lease have commitments about corporate commitments, about value generation at the environmental and social dimensions. In particular, the very interesting one for a project like this one is a net zero commitment by 2025, so 5 years before Paris Agreement. This is somehow kicked off a process to identifying carbon zero solutions in the entire value chain of the site, from recycling the soil to the use of sustainable materials. As I said, Jake can present this much better than me. But my point is having such commitments from the developers as a systemic impact in the entire project. It would be even better if they had such commitments on the investor side, because you have a developer, but also you have capital, and capital normally comes from institutional investors, multi-billion worth pension funds. For instance, this connection in this case is not, let's put it, so strong, but it could be certainly, it's another leverage. For two more points and then I close. Then you have, I forgot that. What was it? Don't remember anymore. Dedicated, sorry, I'm old clearly. You have dedicated investment programs. So it's not the real estate investments, but more like venture capital fund, which to accelerate the development and deployment of clean tech or social impact solutions. Think about education, health services, or clean tech, so environmentally effective new solutions for the site. Again, that's interesting because it's a way to attract and get universities, innovators, entrepreneurs, but also venture capitals to work together and using sites like urban regeneration as, you know, a test bed, a playground, it depends. Finally, there are also some dedicated programs, and I will be happy to share with you some materials for you to read and to compile as you prefer on how do you call it? Activation, site activation. It's not something I work on, but I just heard about it. Activation, so they are dedicated programs for something that you stress very well. A place like, for instance, Mind will take 10 years to develop. It's a very long time. And so you cannot leave that site just an empty space, but you can design dedicated activities that will animate, attract people and generate value also in terms of economic and financial value. And the typical ones are from sport to art and or more like entertainment, concerts, you name it. Again, there are many stuff you can do in order to do that, and makes a lot of sense also from a strictly economic point of view of the developer and the city and the investors. But I would stop here. I'm happy to share the materials on that.
If I can just ask you one brief question, Filippo, in terms of Mind as a space, it wasn't a residential space, so there wasn't neighbourhoods, there wasn't family homes there. So what has been the challenge in creating a community?
So the community, if you want, is right outside Mind, the neighbours, in the neighbours. And some of those communities are a bit rough. And on the other hand, Mind is an innovation district, so it's something in between as an urban site, but dedicated to research and science with a mix of public institutions and big corporations. The famous one is AstraZeneca because the specialization is life science. Relocating in that site because they want to do research or exploit research, working with research centers and universities. So it's a very specific community. If you want, is also a community highly educated, so open to innovation, trained to communicate, to collaborate. I wouldn't take a project like Mind as something replicable. There are aspects which are replicable, as the ones I mentioned before. This research and innovation dimension is very specific to Innovation District and takes a lot of time and takes a lot of money to develop.
Yeah, because it sounds like you're importing talent, not nurturing talent, which is Monica and Jim's kind of key objective. But Jake, and thinking of and Jake, does that, in relation to Stratford and the work you're doing in Stratford, as well as Mind, do you see any parallels or any insights for Monica and Jim?
Yeah, and I can probably just answer a bit more on the last question for Mike. You know, there is going to be, you know, thousands of houses built over the course of the next kind of 15, 20 years. So it's a mixture between bringing together an existing community and bringing them on the kind of innovation journey, while also then creating housing, a location, and a destination for the innovation to happen and the research, etc. So it's sort of blurring the boundaried lines, and that's kind of ever evolving. But you know, the innovation is almost coming first in that instance.
Yeah.
In Stratford, so Shift is the name of the innovation district here, and actually Ford actually has a mobility lab on campus here.
Oh,
But I think my one main comment that I've been working with the 7 founding partners for almost 2.5 years now, scaling this from an idea to legal contracts and actually getting it launched, is the power of sort of a really clear, articulated mission, and what that mission is and how you sort of rally around that. So, why is Google joining forward there? But then also why would a local community member want to join? What do they get out of it? What is the mission that they're there to kind of help solve or help work on, or where is the in routes into their ability to participate? But I found that a really, really strong mission, ours is sort of around within the context of health inequities, climate change, etc., that we're here to kind of create better urban futures, because we have we're slightly different from Mind, where Mind's probably a bit ahead of us on the innovation district front, and the innovation network that's being created, whereas we're probably a bit ahead in terms of physical infrastructure already being here and being delivered. We've got universities already open, we've got 5,000 residents, we're in zone 2 of London. It's kind of already a piece of city and urban part of the fabric. We're not kind of trying to create that, but within that, sort of getting academic partners, private sector partners, tech partners, and the government to agree on something is really challenging. And that's where the power of the kind of mission-oriented innovation helps people kind of put a different hat on outside their organization to come together around and kind of rally around a shared mission, as opposed to not having that and kind of everyone going, well, what do I get out of this? So it's sort of having a kind of macro level vision and mission that allows different people from different organizations with different KPIs, etc., to kind of join. And at the same time, we're also doing a sort of inclusive, everything's going through an inclusive lens, which is, there's already been a lot of work since the Olympics on community groups, getting networks of citizen scientists up and running. Darren, you've done some work on this. But basically, we know air pollution's a big problem. But then if you talk to a local community member, or mom says, actually, air pollution's a really big problem on this corner where I get the bus with my daughter. Okay, well then actually a localized solution to the challenge of air pollution at all is, okay, we need to focus on this street corner in a local area, and there might be lessons that we can extrapolate out from there. But again, how are we having kind of big macro level mission and challenges informed by local experiences, sort of that innovation sort of meets in the middle, where big businesses can still participate in the solutions of those kind of local challenges in a way. So just, I think the power of mission, and there's a whole economist who writes about this, Mariana Mazzucato, Italian, but she works at UCL.
We're big fans of hers.
Yeah, so that's, and UCL is a part of our founding members. So yeah, just the power of the mission to get everyone in a sort of designed by democracy way, challenging, but we've got there, and it's all because of having a really strong mission.
Yeah.
That's great.
Jake, may I challenge you on that?
That's a trilogy. That's
No,
it. Just covered.
just one comment, guys. I agree with Jake until the democratic side of the mission, because Mind is exactly the opposite. It's very top down. There is, so let's be honest, at least between us, Chatham House rules, but it's very top down, meaning that it was set by government and then somehow embraced by the private sector partner, Lend-Lease, but also by the other top guys, but is not really a bottom-up enterprise, and the democratic participation is very limited. For the reason that I hinted before, it's a matter of capacity. To be able to shape the mission of those very large organizations, you need muscles. And big organizations, that's not a problem of public and private. It's really a matter of size and capacity, and how you say, boots on the land. And I've seen how civil society organizations struggle to keep up with the large one, which are not per se great, effective, organized, nothing at all. They just have capacity that the others don't.
I get that.
Well,
Do you want to show the mirror?
yeah, show the deal.
Just real quick before we end this, and just to show this mural, this is the way that we work, and thinking about that bottom up. You can see my screen?
We can, yeah.
Okay. This is, Jim hinted at his background with digital and working with the auto industry. And so this is a design process that's sort of been beta tested and iterated over time, and thinking about missions and thinking about, we use the simple vision and game plan process to sort of facilitate, and those outdoor classrooms will all be kind of digitally connected, and getting the kids' insight connected to these larger projects. That's sort of more of our, so we do have that bottom up. We are bottom up, but we're working in a
Top-down fashion.
yeah, we're sort of acting on the situation, knowing that our ecosystem is top down. But in our case, it's actually top down and failing. So
Yeah.
we don't have much faith in the way that capital and all of that is, but yet we want everyone to succeed. We're not trying to displace or anything. We just want to connect that design thinking and bottom up insight to those investments, which has not yet really been done in a dynamic fashion.
So the slowdown that they're experiencing is opening up these opportunities because they're not doing anything. They're distracted right now. They're trying to figure it out. So there's all kinds of opportunities to fill holes right now because it's in a status mode as opposed to moving forward.
I would potentially recommend, I'm sure you probably have done this already, but if not, trying to find out who, I don't know, the spokesperson or face of the innovation district is, either that works at Ford or Google or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then
if we didn't communicate, we are in communications, like
we're
people like
working
Rush
with
and
Ford leadership.
Yeah, and we also were, while in Pontiac, the emptiness, we still were able to make Pontiac one of the first pilot cities of the National Street Service, which was funded by Ford Mobility.
Let me address one of Jake's other questions. Google came here because of software and Ford's need for such. So however they're working that strategically is unknown to anyone. But I would say that when they came, they weren't thinking that autonomous was going to perhaps get sidebarred or sidelined. And so I don't know exactly, what that may do to the current relationship. And they've been here but a couple of years. And for the most part, it's been pretty silent. And I'm sure they were waiting for this book depository to open, as well as everybody else who is on that creative side of the equation, whether it's from a technological point of view or from an imaginative, innovative point of view. But they're always going to have a role. I just think maybe it's a bit less. The whole vision was about we're going to be driving around living rooms. And of course, that no longer saner minds.
Yeah, I think it's just in terms, maybe to Filippo's point around capacity. Obviously, if you guys are much more connected and on the ground, there could be obviously a better relationship or service you could be providing to a Ford who is not specialized in community engagement, social wealth creation, social opportunity creation, etc. And you could say, hey, some of the leading innovation districts are working on this. Don't launch an innovation district next year without some sort of robust campaign around how you're actually going to be bringing non-Ford and non-Google people into this. Otherwise, you're just going to create a sort of Silicon Valley in Detroit, which obviously they don't want to do that. So I'm really sorry, everyone. I've got a meeting at 4:30.
Yes.
And
Sure.
drop off.
Great
Yeah,
point.
no
Yeah,
problem.
great points. Thank you for
Absolutely. great
Thank you,
points.
Jake, for joining us.
sharing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Good to meet you guys and good luck. It'll be sounds very exciting.
I
Good to
appreciate
meet
it.
you.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Guys,
Yeah.
I have to
We'll
go as
wrap this
well.
with everyone.
But as I said, I will share some materials, including Harvard Business Review is producing a report, is publishing a report that, an article on the impact report that Plus Value produce on Mind together with the Polytechnic University of Milan. So I will share all these materials with Darren, and then he will share with everybody, and happy then to point you in the various directions that might be useful, especially people who are working on the community engagement side.
I'm really interested in your educational pieces. I mean,
Yeah.
Those are crucial.
That's
Darren,
fair.
if you coordinate and write me an email, I can put you in touch with Ilaria, who is the person who designed and coordinates the program, and she will be delighted to exchange on that. By the way, I think Ilaria is in the States in a couple of weeks, so you never know, she might stop by. I don't know
That would be
about
awesome.
her journey, but
Okay, thank you, Filippo, and I'll definitely share the email later on.
yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Darren,
Filippo.
for
It was great to
organizing
meet
it. Bye, guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
you. Bye. Filippo.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
So I'm
Bye-bye.
going to disappear
you.
also, Jim
Okay.
and Monica, but I hope you found that conversation useful. Two great guys, I thought.
Are you kidding?
Yeah,
If
very cool.
the leadership has not seen this kind of conversation of what we talked about. It
Yeah.
is not happened yet in Detroit.
It's
Not
not.
happened. Not happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to keep that in mind, because we're going to get this opportunity to get in the front end of this thing.
Yeah.
We've already been offered it. They told us it'll be when they hire the director, so it'll be in the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
And we would like to think we could invite that conversation.
You've got time. So in relation to that slump in activity you've mentioned and the lack of momentum,
Right.
use that as an opportunity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know,
Just shake
it takes
things up.
5 people to change the world. 5.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
you gotta find them. Okay,
Yeah.
well, we found 3 more.
Well,
I
on
mean-
that note, I'm going to say goodbye to you, and
Okay.
I'll obviously share an email, and I'll put you in contact with Jake as well as, well, you've got their email addresses
Yeah.
actually, haven't you?
Mhm.
Yep.
But I'll just send an alert to remind them to share what they need to share with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Darren. We'll
My
see you at
pleasure.
the next
This is gonna
policy
be,
lab.
this is gonna be huge.
I
Mark my
believe
words.
so. I
Small
believe so.
things become great things. Okay,
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Yes.
They do.
All right.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Peace.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.
Have a great day.